Donald Trump just took one of the most authoritarian swings of his presidency. We talked about it yesterday, seizing control of Washington, D.C.'s police department, ordering hundreds of National Guard troops into the Capitol. Turns out it's not only up to Nancy Pelosi, as Trump said in 2021, when the National Guard goes to D.C. Trump bypassed city elected leaders. He declared it a public safety emergency. He handed control of the police to Attorney General Pam Bondi. And of course, the numbers don't support it. When you look at violent crime in D.C., it was down 35% last year. It's down another 26% this year. Crime for decades has overall been coming down. There have been blips. There have been spikes in certain types of crime at periods of time, in certain locations at periods of time. But the big picture is that crime continues to decline. It declines under Democrats. It declines under Republicans, presidents, that is, because a lot of it doesn't have anything to do with them. But the city's attorney general is saying what Trump is doing is against the law. Under the D.C. Home Rule Act, Trump has something that he doesn't have in most states, which is the authority over the D.C. National Guard. There's no governor of D.C. Therefore, the authority falls to the president, Donald Trump. He can deploy troops without gubernatorial approval, like he did, by the way, in California, without Gavin Newsom's approval. But that is where the word revolt now comes in. The Guard is not a MAGA army. Many serve in overwhelmingly blue states. And of course, D.C. itself is overwhelmingly Democratic voting. Most National Guard are trained for disaster relief, humanitarian aid. They are not trained primarily in patrolling American streets on presidential orders. And in fact, it's a really big deal to deploy troops to do domestic law enforcement. You're not supposed to do it. It's against the law based on the Posse Comitatus Act. So the question now is whether National Guards, because remember, we're talking about states, the question is whether state National Guards are going to revolt against Donald Trump, because rumors are that a lot of National Guardsmen and women are not happy with what is going on. They correctly don't believe that they are being utilized in the way that they are supposed to be. And so a revolt wouldn't really look like armed defiance. I'm not talking about National Guard troops saying, here's my rifle and I'm pointing it at Trump proverbially, right, at the Trump administration and saying I'm not going to do it. The way it would look is units dragging their feet to do what Donald Trump directs them to do, or dragging their feet in general, just to make a point. Commanders sort of quietly shifting troops into non-law enforcement roles, whistleblowers leaking that there is dissent in the ranks and that morale is low. And the idea here, of course, is if Donald Trump tries to apply the LA and now DC method or tactic to Chicago, he talked about other cities of Philadelphia, New York. I don't even remember the full list Trump gave yesterday. The pushback has the potential to become a national revolt of the National Guard. Now, meanwhile, the streets of DC have erupted. Protests broke out yesterday within hours of the announcement. There were hundreds of people rallying outside of the White House. And the mood, from what we've heard, including from people like Samantha Davis of Free DC, is that nobody, the protesters, and even many in the Guard, don't believe that what Trump is doing has anything to do with crime. And in fact, you look at the data, crime is down. Crime's down in DC, crime's down nationally. This is about control, and this is about power. Authoritarians aren't super concerned with crime and public safety. Authoritarians are very concerned with control and power. And the optics of deploying these armored vehicles near the Capitol and homeless encampments are going to be bulldozed, and it's a crime emergency, we are told. Of course, the emergency doesn't exist. This is how authoritarians operate. Now, we've talked about some of the parallels. In 1968, at the DNC in Chicago, National Guard and police cracked down hard on protesters, and there was a political firestorm over it. In 1970 in Kent State, Guard troops were deployed under political pressure, and they killed 4 unarmed students, and it really was a turning point in public opinion. And then there were repeated domestic deployments by Nixon against anti-war protesters. that also had some of the same sort of like turning them against our own citizens kind of optics. So, what's the lesson from history? The lesson is when you turn the Guard into a political force, you erode the nonpartisan image that the National Guard is supposed to have. And you can trigger a legitimacy crisis that could last much longer than the presidency. But there's also a political risk analysis that needs to be done because Trump's second term playbook is about just raw executive power and saying to courts, I dare you to stop me, and saying to governors, I dare you to stop me, and saying to media, I dare you to stop me from, banning whoever or whatever the case may be. We are going to have to see if Guard members resist or if protests escalate and the narrative flips. Does Trump lose control? Does he lose control of the streets? But then does he lose control of the troops that he wants to bring in to try to control the streets? And the danger is, in a sense, the National Guard is a trusted institution. It's not about rah-rah military, but it's when you understand the point of the National Guard and what they do and the fact that a lot of these folks are folks, I forget if it's 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year or whatever it is. These are people who are actually saying, I have a job, I have families in many cases, I have my main thing, but I want to do something extra. And I want to be ready if we do have a humanitarian situation, natural disaster, et cetera. If Trump politicizes that, obviously he's going to alienate the left, but I believe he will alienate almost all moderates and even some Republicans. Even parts of the military establishment are going to say this goes too far. And so Trump's squeezing as hard as he can, and it looks like the Guard may slip from his grasp. Remember, authoritarians love doing things to generate protests to then justify deploying military. If the military you're trying to deploy goes, we're not down with any of this, overtly or implicitly, it could be a real problem for Donald Trump, and that's where we are right now.